Good evening, my friends. This is Paul, and welcome to another episode of ISTJ Info Dumping. Today we're going to be talking about...
Objection! Now just you wait a cotton picking second. You think that in every single video you can do exactly the same thing with exactly the same hairstyle and your audience is gonna like it? I mean, most YouTubers, they start upping their game, moving over to Twitch, and you're still on this platform talking about basically the same things that you've been talking about since the beginning of your channel. Why don't you get an intro? Why don't you get an end card? Why don't you get monetized? Why don't you start telling people to hit that like button? Why are you ignoring what every single person is saying? And for the love of everything plastic holding me together on this here stand, why do you have to be so darn consistent? And why do you ignore the fans when the fans obviously are asking you to change? Are you tone deaf or something? Are you starting to turn like Nintendo where they blatantly ignore fans' opinions?
Wow, you see why I don't really like dominant judging types that much? They're so loud and obnoxious and opinionated, and they can't just have a civil discussion. Instead, they kind of just dump their opinions on you. So, before I get into that, I just want to say that there is one little problem with Patrick's argument. Patrick is very concerned here about ISTJs preserving a certain kind of image and making sure that despite our need for personal consistency, that we don't want to please everyone. Well, if he really wanted to please everyone, why did he say, now just you wait a cotton pickin' minute? Don't you think that's a bit of a southern stereotype there? Don't you think you might be offending people that might be actually from Tennessee?
Take that!
Okay, I'll stop with the Ace Attorney memes, but you would think that seems like a little bit of a paradox. ISTJs don't like change. They don't like going past their methods of consistency. But yet they also don't like conflict at the same time. But wouldn't always doing the same thing cause conflict with people that are more averse to consistency and people that need to change their phone background every week? Well, yeah, it is kind of a paradox. But I would say that generally speaking, when you don't have those kinds of paradoxical situations that are constantly butting heads with each other logically, the main reason we don't like conflict is the same reason why we don't like change. We don't like to have to think about the big picture, the big grand scheme of things, because every single person is different. And not only that, but most human beings on Earth tend to have a very, this is my opinion, and I'm right and you're all wrong, or they have a, well, it's just my opinion, but like, that only matters for me. So if I want to kill someone, that's totally fine. But if you don't want to kill someone, we're getting into a bit of political territory here. But basically, ISTJs wish that such an approach didn't have to exist. If we had our way, we would just say, okay guys, let's just stop having opinions and just follow that which is absolute truth and just go for it. Then no one would have arguments. No one would ever have to get offended. We could just all live in peace and harmony. Haha, you wish. Unfortunately, as introverts, we ISTJs, the only person's feelings that we can entirely understand and please are our own. So instead of wasting all the effort that ESTJs and ESFJs and even ISFJs to a certain extent put out all that energy to make sure that they're pleasing as many people as possible, that they've got all the feelings taken into account, and we got to figure out, what is the ultimate equation? What does all this mean? We ISTJs just say, no wonder why we nap so much. That's a lot of work. We're just going to think about what feels the best to us, stick with it, and then ask questions if maybe we might be breaking some kind of rule. Because ultimately, you could argue, well, Paul, you need to know where the rules are coming from. You can't just blindly follow rules. But then the next part of the statement is, okay, well, even if we don't know where the rules came from, some rules are better than no rules. If someone said to me, Paul, don't go wandering into the street, and they're not my parent, I would of course be like, why are you telling me what to do? But if no one told me what to do, and I wasn't told not to run into the street, I'd probably get hit by a car and die. Now, I'm sure that's an extreme example, but it's the first one that popped into my head. Extroverted intuition, gotta love her random tangents. And that type of consistency of don't go running out into the street helps keep an ISTJ safe. At the end of the day, we're all a bunch of big cowards. I would say the ESTJs are actually even more, but we'll get to that in an ESTJ info dumping if that ever comes. But we ISTJs are secretly super babies, like whining in the corner, afraid of everything. Our extroverted intuition makes us overimagine every single terrible possibility that's going on. And a lot of times that can be a little bit annoying to constantly be thinking so pessimistically. So we kind of just stop and decide to enjoy life after all that. And trying to change for the sake of people wanting change isn't necessarily going to produce good results, because what if someone really likes the consistent pattern? Then what? Then you're saying that we have to isolate those people because the majority of people are saying this is the way we want it? Now, I could understand that reasoning if, say, it's a big corporation, like Nintendo, where they're making games that people are actively angry about. You see, they're trying to make money, they're trying to make a living, but money isn't everything. You also want to please the people who are buying your products. You don't want to just sell someone trash and say, it's money, who cares how we got the money, let's just revel in it. That's basically theft. ISTJs, well, I would like to think that we're not really suited to big corporations. We don't really like positions of authority and leadership. We prefer to just sit around and do whatever we're asked to do, because our inferior intuition doesn't give us the ability to think that far in advance and try to come up with a system. We'll save that for the ESTJs. They create the systems, ISTJs preserve it. After they've seen the system in place, a lot of ISTJs will remember that for the rest of their lives. And they'll try to keep that system as much as possible, but they won't necessarily try to enforce it on every single person they meet. Instead, they'll kind of try to enforce it on themselves. Now, when ISTJs do enforce a system that they believe strongly to be true, they can come across as a little bit forceful at first. But generally speaking, if they're anything like me, they find that it's just a waste of time to be yelling and pointing fingers and trying to convince people. And they just realize, you know what? The world's a bunch of idiots, and if they're not going to listen to us anyway, then it's a moot point. It's like trying to figure out how to swing the swing over the bar. It's impossible, so why even try? ISTJs, I guess you could say we have enough intuition where we realize when something is a losing battle. And we figure, why are we wasting all this time trying to think about every single person's needs? Obviously, we don't want to be selfish. We don't want to think that I am the only person in the universe, and therefore, why should I care about these petty people's emotions? Obviously, we care about them. We just have a hard time detecting them. And that has to do with the polar extroverted feeling, which you may be thinking, wait, Paul, are you sure you're not confusing that with ESTJs? No, the seventh function is the polar, or point of least resistance function. And that function is the least used and least understood function in the stack. The eighth function is the function that kind of like drives you crazy and is super mysterious when you see it in action. But the seventh function is actually the one that's actively unused. And when other people use it, you're completely baffled, like, huh? What the heck is going on here? Case in point, my hair. Now, I'm pretty sure a lot of people probably think that my haircut is terrible, but for the record, I might be going bald soon, so I'm going to enjoy my hair while it lasts. Second, is that really a life or death issue? Is that going to put more people on the streets just because I have long hair? Is that really going to kill someone and cause them to drop dead? No, it's just a personal preference of how I choose to be comfortable. And if you think about it, a lot of people tend to do stuff just because it makes them comfortable. Like, if people really never thought of their own personal comfort over trying to think of the tribe mentality, then I think a lot of girls wouldn't spend nearly as much time in the bathroom and wearing the certain things that they would. Because after a while, the only argument they can give is, Paul, it's hot, or Paul, I feel ugly without putting on eyeshadow. So at the end of the day, even if she's surrounded by a pack of guys that hates eyeshadow, it makes her feel personally good to have that stuff under her eyes. At the end of the day, she does it. ISTJs do the same thing. Why? It's not going to kill anyone. Now, if an ISTJ was doing something consistently wrong, that's where the introverted feeling comes in. That's the sense of what is right, what is wrong, how do I figure out what matters to me? And they were told that they were doing something unethical, evil, sinful, against the rules. ISTJs would feel terrible and blame themselves for it immensely. So you could say that when we do entertain a tribe mentality, it's if it interferes with our values, and if it turns out that a higher power who knows way more than us inferior intuitives says, wait, you do realize what disastrous cycle of events you just set into motion by that insensitive word you just said there. We can't see the future. How are we supposed to know that saying to someone is going to cause them to think that we're perverts? Okay, that's another bad example. Even I know that much. But there are times where I have these really innocent, like, huh? What? Moments where I have no idea that something I said might have been offensive or misconstrued or the wrong thing to do. And my intuition, being so pathetically bad, is going to be saying, huh? You're making no sense right now. Do you care to explain yourself? So that's why we need people like ESTJs and ESFJs in our lives. Because they explain, we follow. It works really well. Now, if they would get a grip on their emotions and maybe try not to be so about it, maybe things would be better. But I think they just get the impression that most people don't like following rules, and so they forget that, supposedly, ISTJs are the most common personality type, so we thrive on these. And we are not going to be the ones who rebel, so therefore you don't really need all that force. So logically speaking, that's kind of unnecessary. I think they're just used to people resisting, I think is the main goal. And they forget to do a census and be like, okay, let's check up every single person at work. Paul, what personality are you? Sir, I am a Myers-Briggs ISTJ, melancholy choleric, I will have you know. Melancholy choleric. Okay, so when I'm talking to you, I will make sure that I will not shout, because that is totally unnecessary. Got it. What about you, sir? Oh, sorry, I was dozing off. What'd you say? Yep, need to use force with that guy. ESTJs don't do that. ESTJs are going to make a judgment based on what they see in the moment, and then they're going to second guess it later. So, I think because of that lack of a checkboard mentality of, let us check every single fact. Let us observe every single thing around us. Let us make sure that we don't do this. And bang ourselves into a door because we didn't look before we leapt. We ISTJs always look before we leap. We say, it's hot outside. Let's get some air conditioning. Are people going to hate it? Yes. People are going to say, what the heck is this ugly white door doing in your background? We're going to say, because it's hot, we need to be comfortable, and we're not going to have to bow down to every single thing that you like. Now, I feel like this has got a little bit on a tangent, because we've talked so much about why we ISTJs tend to be more independent, but we've sort of danced around the main issue of why do ISTJs hate conflict? Why do ISTJs prefer consistency? Well, it's because conflict arises when people are having a misunderstanding and something is not being clear, or when people have two differing opinions and they both claim that it's based on fact or objective truth, but they're blatant contradictions of each other. Because ISTJs value fact so much, they're going to be wondering, well, if this person says this is fact and this person says this is fact, which one is right? How do you tell which one is the objective authority that we can figure out, how do we live life if everyone is disagreeing? It makes ISTJs confused. Our need for clarity is compromised because everyone else is claiming that they have the way to go and no one else can do other than what we say because you're going to be a bigot or prejudiced or racist or whatever ist word they're going to come up with next. And we don't like that. That's why we prefer to settle things by reason and talking it out. Because, generally speaking, when you talk in a calmer voice, it gives the impression that the person is more willing to be open to suggestions. So we can say, okay, so this is what you claim to be true. So let's figure out what are your sources. Let's figure out where are you coming from with this approach. And sometimes if you question someone to a high enough degree, it can lead to a breakthrough discovery of, I see. So the entire reason you've been doing all this is because some kid bumped into your shoulder when you were 10, and that has caused you to have adverse side effects. Again, an exaggeration. But it is true that a lot of people base their views on personal experiences that happened to them as a child that they never fully matured from as an adult. In that case, that is not very good objective reasoning. That is based on one person's experience that they're using to shape an entire worldview. No thanks. We ISTJs do that too, but we realize that it's stupid, and we also realize that not everyone thinks like that. And so that's why we try to come up with, okay, what is the truth? That's not based on feelings. That's not based on personal experience. That's not based on some rando saying, I know everything. It's based on who's observed the most, who's come to the best conclusions, and who has more intuition than us. Who is that? I don't know, but we'll figure it out eventually. Now, how does that relate to why ISTJs like consistency? Why don't I have an N card? Why haven't I migrated over to Twitch? Spoiler alert, I kind of have, but I'm not going to advertise it. Well, it's because it goes back to that theme of comfort again. So, if I were to say, I don't know, wear this shirt with a bunch of sand on it instead of cloth, that would be, kind of itchy, and that would be unpleasant. And when you're in discomfort, you tend to not be the best version of yourselves. At my job, I was learning about how if someone just decides, it's just petty abuse, I'll get over it, it actually affects their work ethic, and it makes them produce worse results as a result of trying to brush aside their discomfort. We ISTJs realize that discomfort is a part of life. We don't try to ignore and be afraid of the emotions like the ESTJs and ENTJs do. We accept emotions. We're just not going to love them to dictate every little thing. So the emotions that we do have, we have this, okay, so I am detecting that I'm not comfortable here. And that's leading to poor results. So therefore, we should be comfortable so that our results can be better. In other words, if you put an ISTJ in their element, that's also when they're at their best. It's also when the ISTJs feel okay with expressing their introverted feeling and their extroverted intuition. When they're in a safe environment, they tend to be okay with being themselves. You could say that about any type, really. When an ESTJ is in their element and feeling comfortable, you'll see that they'll start talking about, like, yeah, something actually is really bothering me. And people say, oh, you do have feelings! So in the same way, when an ISTJ is in their comfort level, people say, you guys actually are very creative. You've just been uncomfortable this whole time. Why didn't you change your shirt? Or something to that extent. So the consistency is where we get the comfort. The dominant intuitive types are going to hate me for saying this. They're going to be like, you're telling me you're okay with eating a bowl of Lucky Charms every single day. Well, it's better than coming across a food that tastes terrible. Because if you change for the sake of change, inevitably, you're going to have a chance that something bad is going to come along. ISTJs don't want to take that risk. It would be better off if we just stuck to something that is pleasant and didn't try to change just for change's sake, unless if the change offers a strong, definitive possibility that it'll be more pleasurable than what we already have. So, at the end of the day, ISTJs are perfectionists, at least most of them are, and we like to make sure that we're the best person possible. We like to make sure that we're giving everything 100% and we're not just copping out or doing things half. I can't think of a good enough word that doesn't sound like a swear word, but we basically don't want to do stuff that's lazy, get it over with. We want to make sure that whatever we're presenting, be it our content, be it our work services, that people are going to say, you are a person that I can depend on, and I am proud of you, and I know that you're never going to let me down. But we can't do that if we're uncomfortable. That is why ISTJs like consistency, because at the end of the day, it all comes back to, we love you guys, but we can't love you guys if we're miserable. So we decide to keep things the same so that you guys can keep being happy by the results that we give. We're just not going to broadcast them all that much because we're secretly stage fright. And we don't want all that publicity. And we don't want people to be telling us that we're the greatest thing since sliced bread when we're actually not. And we're actually just average. So, if all of this sounds like just a whole bunch of rambling, let me just wrap it up in a nice, neat package, as the intuitive types would say, because they're not as literal as me. We keep things consistent because it makes us comfortable. When we're comfortable, we make people happy. When people are happy, there's no need for conflict. We don't like conflict because there's not a definitive answer from conflict. You can't say, you can't say the sky is blue, and that's a terrible example. I'm not good at coming up with examples on the top of my head today. I hope you guys will forgive me. So with that, thank you very much for listening to me go on and on and on about stuff that most of you probably don't care about in the slightest. Thank you so much for being patient with Patrick coming onto my channel. I know sometimes he says and talks about things in a way that's mildly offensive to some people, but if you could do what I suggested and get a checklist and say, okay, is Paul actually trying to be offensive, or shall I look at the rest of the content in his video and find the context? Check. Paul is a melancholy choleric. He is not the type that is going to offend people, so therefore I won't get offended. Will it work? I don't know, but I hope so. So with that, thank you very much for watching, and until the next time, no, Patrick, you may not chime in. I am going to say this, whether you like it or not. Keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless for the 1000th some odd time on this channel. Bye-bye.